didn't get a chance to read it, but you wrote an article recently about a theater,
Mm,
a play.
yeah,
And I want to read it. I meant to read it today, and I didn't get a
it's
chance to.
okay.
I want to read it, but
It's really long.
well,
Disgusting,
I'm
Jimmy.
It's so
intrigued. I'm
long.
intrigued. I was intrigued by
How I've never
your.
written about theater before, and I
Well, no,
don't
you.
really
Well,
care
you.
for it as a
No,
genre.
like you
No,
tease.
we
You
think
teased it a little bit,
I did.
and I.
Well, okay, yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm
No, go.
interrupting you.
I'm curious about the story. I am gonna read it anyway, but
All right. So essentially, what had happened was, our like the creative director at Proctor's, who like worked with us forever, Richard Loveridge. He's like the best of the best. Amazing photographer. Um, he is like doing this archiving thing where he's like doing a bunch of like metadata on all the photography that he has that's like in the archives of like Proctor's, and like Proctor's owns Capitol Rep, and like they have a new place in Saratoga, so they're kind of like doing all this like backlogging and kind of like logging it. He's like, I think he's doing it a lot on like personal interest, and he just like wants to tell the stories of all the stuff that he's found. And he found this set of photos and was trying to figure out like where they belonged and what it was from. And he brought it to Paul Grondel at the Writers Institute, to ask, like, he's like, hey, I think this was like rep related, and he's like, oh yeah, that was Toni Morrison's play that she put on in Albany. It was her first play, and at that time they like had assumed it was her only play, which was actually not true. She has a few that she's done since this one, but um he came to me and was like, yo, I have this crazy story. Basically, he had like, oh, he had gone to Paul Grundle after he found the Wikipedia page, actually. So he had found this Wikipedia page that was like, yeah, Toni Morrison wrote this play called Dreaming Emmett, and she put it on in the Cap Rep in Albany, and it was commissioned by the Writers Institute. And then after its first run, she burned all the copies and like never talked about it again.
why?
Right? So it was like this whole weird story where Richard like comes up to me at my desk and he's like, I have the craziest story for you. And I'm like, you know, I love a crazy story.
You know I'm here for it.
You know me for it. And he's like, I found all these pictures, and like goes through the whole thing. And I'm like, that's wild. Like, I'd love to, I want to know why. Like, because like Toni Morrison's crazy. I've only just begun reading her books, and they're fucking intense. And I'm like, she wrote plays. Like, what? How? I have so many questions. So I wanted to figure it out. So we ended up, I just like started asking. I like talked to Paul at the Writers Institute, and then he led me to this guy who was uh the founder of Cap Rep, like in the 80s when she had put on the play. And essentially like they the Writers Institute commissioned her to do this play because it was the first year they were commemorating Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday as like a national holiday. Yeah. And so they were like, "Oh, you," she had either come to them and said, I want to write this play," or she was already working on it. I don't remember right now like which one it was. And they were like, "Yeah, like we'll pay for it, whatever." And so then she brought it to these writers, and they're like, "Cool, we'll put it on." And they hired all these people out of the city. So like this one, the director had worked on The Wiz on Broadway, like when it
Oh,
was first coming out. The main actor, Joseph Phillips, who's like an amazing person. I got to talk to him about his role in it for the story. He was on the Cosby Show. He like played, I forget what his name was, but like he was like the main boyfriend of one of the daughters.
I think I
I
know
can't, yeah, I can't
what he looks
remember.
like. I
Hmm.
think he's in my.
He
He
was
was
like,
there. He was like a regular.
yeah, cause and it was only, he had only done like one episode of the show before he did the play. So it was like he was kind of like,
Oh wow,
was like,
that's really
hey, he's
cool.
like, hey, that worked out. I don't know if it's gonna go somewhere yet, but I'm still gonna keep doing theater. And he found out about this play and like did it. And then there was just like,
This is a nuts
it's
story.
insane because then there was all this like, I guess the director was extremely like it's like hard to, it's like everybody's kind of like touchy about talking about him because he's passed, and so it's like I guess he was like pretty abusive to a lot of the people, like made everyone on set cry. Even like the main actor was like, yeah, I remember um he was fine with me for almost the entire play, but like at the it got to like kind of the I was the last person essentially that like was still on good terms with him by the end of the production. And I remember thinking in my head like I was your last friend in the world. Like he was a difficult person to work with. Like he was actually like fired from The Wiz. And another director got on for when it actually got onto Broadway. Like there's all this stuff, but he was really good friends with Toni Morrison, and she like really trusted him to do this play like in the way that she wanted. And the play was actually about, and like I realized that I never actually said that what it was about, but it was about based on Emmett Till.
Oh,
Yeah,
powerful subject.
yeah. So it was heavy. And
Yeah.
I got to talk to this like professor who was basically like nobody was ready to talk about that. And even like Joseph Phillips was saying that it was such an intense experience. Like I guess Gilbert Moses, who was the director, had them do all of these like rehearsals where they had to do improv, where he made them reenact the kidnapping and lynching. Like
Oh my
almost move for
God.
move to the point where like they got up to like asking like the woman like is this the boy, and he like told me like how he felt. He's like, I knew they weren't gonna kill me, but I felt such real fear, like I just wanted it to end. And like that was just so much a part of their regular practice. And then like the actual play was like essentially giving, it was like based on Emmett Till, but it's this like nameless, faceless boy who is like shot in the back for stealing a kite. And it's supposed to represent like, I mean, this is happening in the 80s, and like this shit happens today. Like it's the same shit we're still living with, where like young black men are shot and murdered and victimized by people in power, especially cops. And like it's like we've never gotten away from it, which is why for me I was like, why don't we have this now?
Mm.
And essentially, I mean, a lot of people think that it was just like too difficult for people to process. I mean, it's not like a movie you can
No.
turn off. You
Right.
can't like put down a book.
No.
Like I mean, in reading some of her books, I have to like literally put them down and take a lap for a little, because I like it's a lot. It's like very real, you know? Like I mean, she was a very like visceral writer, so I can't imagine what it was like to watch that happen. And it's just like
Theater is like that.
super intense. But yeah, I mean, all this promo stuff was planned for it. Just I think because of the um recognizable names in it.
Yeah. And it just got burned.
Yeah, I mean, she just didn't want to and it's still unclear because like who can speak for her? You know
No
what I
one.
mean?
No one.
Because right now it's up to like everyone I've talked to being like, we speculate that maybe she, because she was such like a really practiced and like perfectionist of a writer, that she looked at it being played out and thought like this wasn't what I wanted it to be,
Hmm.
and shut it down, or like
So,
maybe it was too
Toni
difficult.
Morrison pass away?
Yeah, last year, like last summer. So like pretty recently.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we don't have a take on like,
That's nuts.
and it was, yeah, like, and even the Writers Institute has a copy of the script, but like I was told it's not for public
So
viewing.
no one's read it. No one read it.
Joseph Phillips has a copy still. Yeah. He told me he's like doesn't know where it is because it's like in his stuff, but I do know some people from the theater community have reached out to me after reading it and been like, you think we could get it? And I was like, I mean, hit up the Writers Institute, like ask them what it takes, because like they just like, I didn't get like a clear
That's
answer as to like,
crazy.
was
Seems
it
like
because
with the right participants and the right
right,
director, it would
right,
make
like
sense.
is it could it be unearthed respectfully? Is that maybe what they're concerned about?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah.
or
They-
is
they
it a
wanna
matter
do
of her
it good.
estate? That's another
fair.
question.
There's-
I also had like tried to reach out to the Emmett Till estate to see maybe like they didn't like that, the association, but I never got an answer back from them.
There's so many possibilities
Right,
here.
there's so much up.
It could be the time felt unsayable. Like we can't say this.
Oh yeah.
You know.
No, I can't imagine watching that play out. And it was like it was like a dreamlike kind of portrayal of his life, because the basis of the play was Emmett Till as a concept is coming back to life and wreaking havoc on the white men who murdered him. So
Oh
he's
shit.
taking vengeance on them. So it was very much like a like they were like big huge like we have I put all the like the photos up that we have
It's
on
kind
the
of like
page so you can see like there are these giant paper mache masks that they wore and like that represented not only like the white men that murdered him but also like represented all the black men who have been murdered and forgotten.
yeah.
So like they have no names, they have no faces, like nobody knows who they are anymore because like they're not remembered in a public light the way that like say, I don't know, if anyone's a fan quote unquote of true crime, like who do we remember? We remember mostly like
The killer.
young white women and killers, yeah. They're glorified in a way. We like are obsessed with them. We aren't obsessed with like the lives of these young people where like it should be more there should be more Emmett Tills where like we and do we all remember Emmett Till because I'm sure there are a lot of cultures around the US who don't know who the fuck Emmett Till
Yeah.
is. Like when I lived in South Carolina when I was growing up, we were taught that the Civil War was an economic issue, not a racial issue at all. So like I'm like there I know for a fact that there are people who are probably not ever teaching this thing. I mean like look at we have like Watchmen right now. You've watched that show yet?
Yeah, I mean
No, I haven't
the
watched it.
only
That's
reason
like based
why I'm
on
aware of Emmett Till is because of a Kanye West song.
right? Like
That's the
we don't
only
get
reason
taught
I
about
don't.
this.
That's the only
Wow.
reason why I know.
And like imagine being faced with that like on stage and you're like what the fuck is happening? And you have to not only face that this was a thing that happened and was passed over and like all these men got away with it and then the woman on her deathbed was like whoops sorry like I did this.
I get the oh man, it's oh,
There's
there's
so
so
many
much
things.
potential for this, but it makes me feel guilty even feeling that way.
Sure.
Do you know what I
Because
mean?
you don't want to like
I don't want
take
to profit
advantage
off
of
of
it.
that, you know? But
Right.
like there's so much to be said here.
But I'll say what is really great, I guess going back to sort of like the Capital Region arts community, there are a lot of like local theater groups that aren't necessarily made up of like white men
Mm.
that could take this
Mm-hmm.
and do something really cool with it. And I've like heard from a few people who I think would be great to do it.
It would be,
And
I mean, you could even
I mean, it's
you could
we can
even
handle it now, I think.
you could even recontextualize it based
I
like
don't think it would even be necessary, honestly.
really?
Like knowing what I know about the play and like know having heard from the people who were in it, like talking to Joseph about his experience, I think you don't even have to do that because we're so familiar with these instances.
Mm.
We're even like what's the word I can't think of right now? Like desensitized to the
Yeah.
like shootings and like this shit happens in Troy, it happens in Albany, like it's like it happens here. It's right
Yeah.
now.
What I meant by that was more like somehow include the fact that this was buried.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and now it can
Like
be
add a
said.
note to that,
Like,
yeah.
this was almost 40 years ago, and like we're still dealing with it. This is
And
so far
that
after the fact,
and
and we're
why
still
is
having to deal with this bullshit.
like you think of I don't know, I guess I never was really familiar with the theater community until I kind of had to be.
Yeah.
And like now it's like they kind of laud themselves on like we've done this play and blah 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 and it's like why aren't you proud of this shit?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't you looking at that and being like we had a crazy play happen and we kind of like swept it under the rug because we were like this was too hard
Mm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
No.
way cooler than any fucking Shakespeare shit. Like we've heard it before. Not to
No,
say that
I
like
get
Shakespeare is
it.
shitty.
No,
Like
I
I'm not
get
gonna
it.
be out there and saying
It
that.
didn't come off that way at all.
But like, can we see something new?
Yeah.
But like really new.
Yeah.
But not that's like, hey, like I'm a dude that's been writing in the area for a long time, and I wrote a play, and like it's about whatever the fuck, and it's like no, this was a crazy relevant play that not only for like the time of what it was supposed to be portraying and the time that she wrote it, but
Yeah.
right now, like forever. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it fucking sucks that it's still relevant, but it's like goddamn, we could use this right now.
In a way, theater is the only medium you could really do it. I mean, it's the best medium to do it in. Because I don't like that my brain went here, but when you were talking about the revenge aspect, my brain went to Django Unchained, rewriting history.
Sure.
You know, like that's where my brain went to,
Mhm.
which is like You could do that way on screen on a movie, make it
Yeah.
very movie like. But with theater, for me anyway, theater is live. This is
Mhm.
happening right now. You can't look away. There's no It's what makes it such an incredible art form. Um
Mhm.
it
Yeah. No,
demands
people
your
are
attention.
trapped.
It demands your attention in a way that basically no other art form
Mhm.
does. You can zone out while you're listening to music or watching a movie or watching a TV show or looking, or even if you're in an art museum, you can zone out. You cannot zone out in a play. You just can't do
Because
it.
you're not only at the mercy of like what's happening in the story, you're at the mercy of like the way that the actors are experiencing it in the
Yeah.
moment, but also the people who are in the room with you.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what it would have been like to, and like that's been the most interesting thing to read, just sort of like seeing it living on social media right now, where some people are speaking up and being like, yo, I remember that, and I remember the intermission was like super confusing and scary and weird. Like people are saying this stuff now, which is like great. So glad that you're like talking about this, because we should be talking about this forever.
Mm.
Like cool, like tell us more about how it was scary, like why was it scaring you,
Hmm.
like what was uncomfortable for you, why were you confused.
Yeah, my brain automatically went to like a play within a play, like the play of this life, and you get to see the play, and then it ends with the burning of it. I mean, that's like such a depressing ending, but it hits a note, like the fact that it was burnt
Yeah.
hurts in another way. Do
Yeah.
you know? It
Yeah.
it, it adds a whole other
Yeah.
element to it.
And it's not entirely lost. That's the
Yeah.
one point of it, is like there are copies that exist. Like she felt the need to not have it in her life anymore, but there was a copy that the Writers Institute has that's not available. There is a copy that Joseph has. Like people have playbills, there are posters, like there's evidence out there. And like isn't it cool that like this is just one little thing, a blip
Hmm.
in our radar, but this cuz it could exist in like millions of other
Hmm.
communities around. Like shit like this happens all the time. Like albums get written and like forgotten. Like this kind of shit is like forever, and we could be writing about all this stuff, and
Hmm.
that's what matters.
Yeah.
That's what's cool. Like let's remember all this and like keep talking about it.
It
It's all
just
about archiving. Archiving's great.
it breaks my heart that somebody felt like they couldn't express something
Right.
so fucking important,
Yeah.
like
Or
it
that
it
it wasn't
hurts me.
worth holding on to.
Yeah,
That in whatever way it was.
which might have been a
And whatever her
self-defense mechanism.
experience
No
was,
idea.
because
Yeah.
like honestly
Jesus.
in the conversations that I had, I don't think her experience was very good with like the production people, with the theater. It
Yeah.
just didn't seem like it was a very positive
I
experience for
can't
her.
imagine. I mean, even just in order to write it, you'd have to stay in a
She's so good
headspace
at that though.
that's just terrible.
Yeah, that's what she does. It's insane. She like lives in that world, and she goes to the darkest places because she wants to make you know that pain
Mm.
in a way that like we could never experience, particularly the three
Yeah.
of us. We
Yeah.
will never know that aspect of life.
Hmm.
And it's like that's why I think it's like fucking horrifying. Like to read her books is like it feels like a necessary experience, and like I literally can't put it down because I'm like god damn, like this is a real thing that we just like kind of let happen in a day-to-day like existence, not
Hmm.
even in our time. Like yeah, this has happened before, and like we can't really help them happen before, but it's that whole aspect of like all the things that we know that are going on and that really fucking suck. Like kids are in camps and fucking dying and being separated from their parents, and we kind of have to like what, like exist day to day and like hopefully give money to like raices, RAICES, give them money. But like what, like we're living in this time where it's like we're so used to looking back at time periods and being like, why didn't they do anything? I can't believe they didn't do anything. Like, oh, thank God, like these people in Germany like put Jewish people in their basements and their attics and like they're heroes, and it's like what the fuck are we doing?